Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This is Langley Outdoors, the place where we not only talk about what's going on in the gun world, our amazing country, but how we're going to fix both of them together. And today we have a special treat. We have U.S. Representative Victoria Spartz. This is a treat that I have been looking forward to so much. I hope you guys enjoy this. We're going to dive into some things that I know a lot of you followed, but some of you new to the channel might not know. This is how we pursue freedom, people. So if you guys are new, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on. And with that, we're going to dive right into this interview. I am so excited. And with that, Congresswoman Victoria Spartz, thank you so much for tuning in today. This is a real treat for you to come on the channel. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Braden. It's a treat for me to speak to freedom-loving Americans. It's always an honor.
There's plenty of freedom-loving Americans over here. So let's dive right into this. This is something I have been wanting to talk to you about ever since that I saw you sit down with little Steve Dettelbach, director of the ATF in Congress. You became a bright shining star in my life because you took him to task around some very important things that have been happening from the ATF and the executive overreach. When you sat down and you said to him something that was so important. Do you understand exactly what you said? Do you understand how dangerous your rules have become? Because if you guys are not following it, the ATF and the executive overreach from the Biden White House, when they couldn't get their gun control, they just made up rules whole cloth. They were extremely vague. They were not very clear, and it led to some very bad outcomes. One particular case, Brian Malinowski, who is an airport executive who got caught on the bad end of the ATF. That's what the hearing was about. So when you were talking to Steve, you were very passionate about your prior experiences and what the government has kind of done from a standpoint of getting around the rules and skirting the rules. Where is your perspective on the next steps of this? Like, for example, we have an election come up in 2 weeks. Trump wins. What's the next step? Harris wins. What's the next step? What's your perspective from that?
Well, one thing, I appreciate people like you are raising concern with these issues and how important it is. Listen, I grew up under oppression and under mob rule. I always say, you know what? If we want to go into mob rule, as long I have lots of guns and ammunition, am I ready? I'm not sure what Americans want to go there. That's tough. And I don't think this is a lot of people realize it. But if you can see in this election, no one is campaigning on gun control. That's a positive thing because more Americans start realizing we do not want to be controlled by the government that usually always have guns in any oppressive country. And we also don't want to be controlled by criminals that always have guns. Criminals never stopped, by laws. we would have
Right.
empty jails. This is for law abiding citizens and really cause us a problems to be able to defend us, ourselves, our family, our country, and our freedoms. And I think the positive thing we can see that they're not campaigning on this issue. What it means that more Americans realizing the importance of this right, and that's how we're going to win. And we need to talk to people. More women now actually become gun owners. Understand? I always say this is an ultimate equalizer. No matter how tough guys said physically you are tougher than me, but if we have a gun and you have a gun and me, and if we, I'm good with it, it doesn't matter how tough you are. That is really empowers women, and also that is very important. I told my girls, be good with guns because that is how you're going to protect yourself. So this is very important, and some things are positive about that too.
Right. And I think excuse me. And I think something that you just said was so important because I've actually hit on that. I didn't plan to go into that conversation, but the idea that the left is not full stop campaigning on gun control is an implication that it's not as popular as it used to be. Now,
That's right.
one of the things that they've done, and we've covered on this channel a couple of times, Tim Walz has gone out there and he said that I believe in the Second Amendment. We are responsible gun owners, but Harris has said she wants executive power around red flag laws. She wants universal background checks. She's hitting all the little check boxes, but it's not appealing to the middle of the road, and it's not going towards a new constituency support. It's going towards her base. And that's a very important thing that you just hit on. They're pursuing their checkbox talking points. They're not pursuing new policy with people because the amount of guns that have been bought in new demographics, as you just alluded to, is off the charts. I mean, it really speaks to something else that's powerful is she's losing demographic support across the board. Her key coalitions of Democrats are falling apart. Whether you're looking at African Americans, Hispanics, union workers, young people. I mean, like everywhere you look, it's falling apart, and it kind of dovetails into that. Are you seeing the same thing from the inside, from DC? I mean, I'm not just making that up from the outside, right? Like there's consistent themes that are popping up on a lack of support for this type of control.
Well, and I can see it in my district. Look at, I have districts that are suburban and rural district, and we have now crime. People are nervous. We have now, my constituents in suburban districts that never had problems with, a crime now have a huge increase in robberies and theft. And now, they all worry about Venezuelan gangs. I just was on the list of a bunch of suburban moms all really freaking out. Truly is what is happening there.
Right.
So it started affecting all communities. And I didn't want to be like real brutal. I was like, well, the best thing we need to put a bunch of stickers that is not a gun-free zone. And not because
Yeah.
they're talking about police. No, do we need to hire police to patrol now at night and all this? And I said, listen, it's very hard for police to go to get fighting policemen that is going to be walking around and cover the whole neighborhood all night, and all this perimeter is too significant, and it's very become very expensive. But a lot of these people that typically didn't worry before, now they start worrying because crimes are increasing, and this open border and lawlessness brings a lot of very serious, dangerous criminals. So I think much more demographic now concern and thinking about starting better with guns and protecting themselves, because they understand at some point you might be, on your own. And I think that is very, positive change in some way, that people start to understand the importance, because, unfortunately, until crises happen, no one pays attention. But I think, Second Amendment rights is something that if we lose, we're in trouble. And I'm glad to see these movements.
Yeah, and what you just said, you never really need it until you need it. I mean, it's
Right.
so 100% correct. Throwing up some gun free zone stickers, it's the weirdest thing. Criminals and gangs, they go through it. It's so weird how they just keep on trucking. It's odd. But speaking of kind of keeping on trucking and a segue in that same topic, a big thing that I hear on my channel a lot around the Harris Biden administration, the gun control from the executive branch, the ATF, the DOJ. It's very clear that for 4 years they couldn't get it through Congress, and they went straight executive overreach. I mean, they were making rules, they were making all sorts of laws by fiat, carrying the penalty of law. And of course, we've gotten bogged down in the court system. We've got the Supreme Court getting involved. There's so many different aspects from the judicial looking at congressional. In my opinion, it's really an issue of executive usurpation of power from Congress. I mean, they basically stole the power from the legislative branch. The big question that I have for you from on the inside, what can be done to prevent these things from being just the status quo in the future? Effectively, we had a tyranny break out in the executive branch, and it just took 4 years to work through it because they wanted some constituency points. So, what can be done to prevent this from taking effect in the future? Like, what can we learn towards this?
Well, listen, thanks God for our judicial branch, that we still have some good people in the
Yes.
Supreme Court, and have some in some district courts like Fifth District that understand and don't allow unconstitutional regulations to get through. I mean, Supreme Court rule on Chevron doctrine, which is pretty
Hmm.
much said that all of these agencies rules very much unconstitutional. But I think what needs to be done, and I always say, I'm very optimistic, at least in one thing. Congress has 12% approval rate and less than senile presidents. So I think that Americans people understand that Congress is not doing its job. So our
Correct.
job is to oversee the executive branch. We have a power of the purse and power of war. They were a first article branch. And until Congress start doing our job, the other branch is going to be running wild. So in one way, they did take our power, but I truly say we gave them our powers. We neglected our responsibilities to the American people and let bureaucrats and very,
Hmm.
radicals running the country and not stopping it, because it's all about the money. We can send them letters day and night. We can do a lot of presentations in committees, but ultimately it's all about the money. We keep sending them the money, keep funding unauthorized agencies for decades. A lot of these departments, Congress haven't authorized spending for decades, and we can send a
Hmm.
blank check. We send a Latin blank check. Here is,
Yes.
you can spend money on. So we need to start doing our job for the American people.
Yes. that is so refreshing to hear someone actually in Congress say that, because that's exactly what's been happening. You mentioned the Looper Enterprises case, which is the one that just struck down the Chevron deference. Um, that's a massive win. Like, and it's arguably in my lifetime, that's probably one of the biggest Supreme Court cases that applies nationwide, just because of the executive overreach. But to your point, and this is a very good point that you just brought up, you can send letters all day long. You can send subpoenas all day long, and they have a certain weight because they are effective in certain applications. But in other areas, they just ignore it. Like something that you said in that interview that I brought up earlier with Dettelbach, you alluded to the fact that they have this cute little trick where they say, hey, we can't tell you about that because there's a pending ongoing investigation. And then by the time the investigation's over, they say, oh man, the statute of limitations is over and there's no consequences. Um, it's kind of the bureaucratic game to get around actually being held accountable. But I think that, like you said, controlling the purse is so incredibly important. Like, for example, um, the subpoenas that James Comer just sent to the the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention was in that same vein. It was, hey, how are the Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the White House colluding with Everytown for Gun Safety, which is a main gun control group, and they're basically interspliced. They're almost attached at the hip. How do we make those have more effect to genuinely affect change? Because that Office of Gun Violence Prevention is genuinely a swinging revolving door from gun control to government, gun control to government. Like, how do we do that?
Of course, we're right now using the government to fund this whole variety of NGOs pretty much that actually campaign against us and our rights, and
Mm-hmm.
we're funding them. They're very clever. Look at the sue settle what they do. They have these liberal groups suing the federal government. They make a deal, they settle it, get a bunch of taxpayers' cash, and put laws on the book as part of that settlement. So
Yes.
Grassley and I, when I started as a freshman congressman a few years ago, I had actually bicameral bill on these issues, and we actually passed that legislation through the Judiciary Committee. And Republicans were not strong enough even to put it on the floor. And
Right.
Democrats couldn't even debate much. It seems like it's totally unconstitutional for judicial branch to put laws on the books. I mean, this is terrible, right? But we
Right.
are not strong to actually put pressure on them. So we have to get better. We need to have adults in the rooms and people with backbone that actually can stop and reform some of the loopholes in the laws that allow them to do it, tighten legislative frameworks that we don't have abuses with, we had great things that Trump was doing, then he left, all executive orders they eliminated, and they have
Mm-hmm.
started doing terrible things. But honestly, the way to govern and legislate is not through executive orders. We need to have laws on the books that are proper and fix some of these laws because they're too broad and allow them to abuse. And they'll be very clever. The same like when they were just doing recently, with this, with the laws that they changed slightly the definition for gun dealers, put the change
Yes.
few words, and with
Mm-hmm.
intent to completely use it as a gun control to put everyone in databases and harass
Mm-hmm.
law-abiding citizens. The true intent, because they understand. If you want to
Right.
control people, you need to weaken people, right? Religion strengthens people. Let's take religion. Education strengthens people. Let's take education. With Second Amendment right strengthens people because you are relying more on yourself and you are not as weak. Let's take Second Amendment rights. All dictators, whether it's Stalin or Hitler, took guns from people first. They
Mm-hmm.
understood that. The law-abiding citizens, own gun. It's a deterrence for their dictatorship, and then they made deals with criminals and use criminals sometimes that they did in Soviet Union. If they cannot put you in jail, if they cannot put you in mental health facility, then they use criminals on you. They're still doing that stuff in a lot of countries. And people are hopeless because they don't have, law-abiding citizens don't have ability to own guns. And criminals can come raid their houses and they're afraid. And that is what's happened. That's how you oppress people and use this mechanism. They know it very well. And that's why they come up to law-abiding Americans and use the machine. But I think we need to be much smarter in our branch, and I hope people will give us an honor this fall to be able to have a Republican majority and Republican president. And I hope we will be able then to show that we can govern. I told our speaker, I said, I'll be nice till November and then I'll be brutal. I am done with this. Republican needs to govern, and we cannot continue this lawlessness in our country.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the main jobs of Congress, to protect constitutional rights, and we forgot about that.
Right. Well, because it's much easier to just hand it off to the executive bureaucracies because you wrote something very vague and passed it. So you can't be in trouble. So when the election time comes around, it's all good. You're insulated. That's exactly what they did for about 30 or 40 years. And with the Chevron case coming down, the Looper Enterprises case changing that, it will be interesting to see how that actually works downstream. But you just went into something else that was, I think, really important just to honestly verbalize. This is not the same constitutional support, Second Amendment groups, the same freedom pursuing organizations like this channel. It's not the same as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. We actually are paying attention and we are intelligent around what's actually occurring. For example, the very rule that you just mentioned with the engaging in business dealers rule that the ATF fine tuned, that came from the Safer Communities Act in the Senate Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that what was that guy's name? Cornyn and Tillis basically negotiated with Chris Murphy on. And when the administration started manipulating it and abusing it for what it was worth, then they started putting things out like, we're going to put out congressional review acts. And it was almost meant as a, look, we're doing something to correct the law that we passed, but now we're going to do this thing that has no teeth. It really filters back down to how important it is to have control. Well, really two things: have control of Congress, have control of the Senate, have control of the White House, but then actually pair it with action. That's incredibly important because all of these things that the ATF we've been fighting for 4 years can be overwritten with a pen, just like they were written in with a pen. So what is the next step? So let's say we have an election coming up in November. What's the next step to get us to the point where we can rip these things out by the root rather than having to do toothless congressional review acts?
Well, listen, and most of them are passed. They already passed the time that it can be effective. It's all messaging. Republicans just do talking point and messaging. We fighting China on Fox News and all this lips. It's all BS. Yeah. So if we really matter, but I think the only thing that happened, and a lot of people, I think it's a combination. First of all, that most of my colleagues have no idea what is in the bills they voted for, and the other side does, and they're very clever. And they are very, very strategic because they have a passion and agenda. And let me tell you, even though I am very polar opposite on the views with most of them, I have to give them credit. They're passionate. If Bernie Sanders talk about, at least he's honest talking about socialists, most of them, they're socialists, they just don't say that, but he's willing to die on that hill and move that. We have too many Republicans are not doing that. And also, a lot of them don't even know what is in the bills, So we have to have a strategy. We need to pick the hills to die on and take them. I used to have 3 hills to die on and take them. Now I said, at least let's do one, So I hope we will at least pick some, because this is really bad. We're moving the country in a bad direction. And we need to decide that we have to do things. But unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., doing nothing, collecting money and blaming the other side became the roadmap for elections. And doing something, you're actually going to get attacked. I mean, every time, as I said, I get ATF or FBI in the committee, I get a political hit piece on me with the craziest stuff. They will write, they will plan articles, newspaper, say the craziest things. A lot of my colleagues, I do nothing and I'll be just fine reelected. So a lot of them are afraid, but I think we need to put pressure from bottom up on Washington, D.C. state. Oh, no, I don't need your talking points. I don't need your messages, Bill. They don't matter. It's all about passing legislation and withholding funding or providing funding for proper causes. So that's Congress needs to do. There is must-pass legislation, and that's when it matters. When we pass our appropriations bills, when we deal with the debt ceiling increase, and next year we will deal with reconciliation or whatever is going to be depending where the lay of the land, but we will be dealing with tax cuts. So that is going to be mass-pass legislation. If something makes in that bill, that's going to be a law. And we need to start demanding some of these very important issues demanding to be must pass bills. Messaging, I am done with that. We're not
Right.
clowns in Washington, D.C.
Well, what you just said, this kind of speaks to what I just alluded to with it's a different time than it was 10 to 15 years ago. Because what you just said with your colleagues, that shall remain nameless. I don't want to put anybody on record yet, but we will though. Um, I mean, we could honestly, this audience could probably guess exactly who it is you're talking about just because we follow it so tightly. But when you're looking at the status quo of just if I just do nothing, then no one will write any mean articles. Effectively, you're ceding your authority to the media because the media just bullies you into doing either A or B for self-preservation. Now, the interesting thing about this is your colleagues don't fully understand the change in the lay of the land which technology has
Mm-hmm.
allowed. So, for example, yeah, you might have a Politico hit piece that comes out on you, and that might be, I don't know, seen by 1,200, 1,500 people. We do a YouTube video on this channel or any of the other channels in this area, we get to millions of views very quickly. So, I mean, just from a standpoint of understanding the impact of partnering with channels that are aligned to the vision of what you're trying to pursue, we're almost turning it on its head from a standpoint of, yeah, you might not get in trouble with this one that 1,500 people will see, but you'll have so many accolades with this one that a million will see. I mean,
Right.
the balance is shifting. And that kind of speaks to the next thing and kind of wrapping this interview. We have the election coming up in, I think, 10 days, 11, 10 days, very quickly. Every single app video I've done covering the election and doing some of the focal points on all the data, the analytics, and all the potential outcomes, I always say you've got to vote. You got to get your friends to vote. You got to get your family to vote. It doesn't matter if the polling says Trump's going to win by 100 or 100 million. What would be your best case of a what do you do now prior to election? What do you do after to truly stay involved to save our country? What's the best piece of advice you can give the people watching?
Well, listen, and just to your point, I wanted to follow up on this, and I had a crazy primary because they're using these ads to run millions of dollars of political ads. So I spent in a few months, they spent $7 million in negative. I say the craziest things. And the only
Right.
reason, I won that primary because all big money, they don't want, in my party, establishment doesn't want women like me that can challenge all
Can
of the
challenge them.
sides,
Yeah.
So they're big money. Some of them went after me, some stay neutral, which I'll take it, but they didn't support me. So I'm really was supporting people on the ground, your listeners and people like that understand what lies they're trying to spread. And that's why it's important to talk to have this conversation. So I completely agree. People are understanding what the lies, the mainstream media is spreading there and what is commercials are. But it's very tough to survive unless you go and have ability to talk directly to the people. And that's what happened in a lot of these battleground states. I'm going to actually travel to Pennsylvania next week. It's brutal. Democrats have so much money. They have media on their sides. They have a bunch of money on their sides, and they have an ads are running these ads non-stop, telling the craziest stuff about Republicans and how great they are. And that is very hard to overcome. That's why we need to reach out to the people. We need to get on the ground and we need to show up because this is going to be very important in tight elections. And I think, this election is going to change the future and direction of our country significantly. They were able to move the country so radically under Obama. And the Trump was a big disappointment for them. 4 more years they can deliver because I'll tell you one thing, I have to give them credit. They deliver on the agenda.
Oh yeah.
They deliver. They are not just a talking heads on TV. I wish we would be as good in our agenda, but we'll work on that. I'll work on making Republicans great again. That's
There
my
you
job.
go.
But for people participate, engage, people in in other states, that are battleground states. But even in the states you live in, don't take things for granted. The machine on the other side is powerful. So we need to make sure we keep this margin high, but people come with all of the frustrations, and also help your House members. I always say, I know that a lot of people worry just about presidency, but if we don't have control of the House, we'll have him impeached day one. That's what they're going to be doing. No
Yes.
great things that he's trying to do will be accomplished. So look at, people down ticket. You don't have to vote for all of them.
Yeah.
But we do need to have Republicans in Congress and Senate. And, even if not perfect one, we'll work on making them better. And if we're not delivered, then we'll just have a clean slate. I said, I'll campaign myself then to get rid of all of us and just do a clean slate, because I am as tired as a lot of Americans are, and I understand what is important times for our country. But I think we also have such an opportunities to bring prosperity, good job, good economy, and good policy for our country, because I go on the ground, we have so much innovation. We have so many good things happening, and the government is really precluded to be, to thrive for our country. We actually, our policies are so becoming oppressive that as innovator, small business owner, you're not able even to succeed now. We're creating these political elites and oligarchs in Washington, D.C. that want to oppress us with big money. But I want to tell you, listen, I have a high schooler daughter, and she started Republican clubs in very liberal school, and she didn't want to do it and couldn't find even teachers, to help her out. But eventually, when she started, she was shocked. She was shocked how many young kids showed up to her class. She was like, "Oh, mom, it's way more work than I thought," and how many of these kids, she had more. Minority kids came to her table, that Black Lives Matter table next to her. And they were like, "Oh, we don't even know if we're Republicans or Democrats, but we would like to learn." So I think people are waking up. A lot of younger generations, they start thinking, maybe that's not as great as they try to promise us. We need to engage, and we need to educate people. And shows like yours, where people can have honest conversation, not all of the lies and propaganda they hear in political world, are very, very important, because this republic will be saved from the bottom up, not in Washington, D.C. Most people there, you wouldn't pay $10 an hour. Okay, so let's just be realistic. If you want them to govern, you go meet with all of them and figure it out. You'll be shocked. Okay, but the government never attract best and brightest. Government was never supposed to be, that's something, on top of the people. Government is supposed to do core function to protect our rights and stay the hell out of our way, and not to spend too much of our money. And I think we need to go back to the basics. In Second Amendment, it's such an important right, but I'm very optimistic to see how much more people appreciate it. When I was state senator a few years ago, I couldn't even barely deal with my Republican supermajority to strengthen Second Amendment right. But I see more and more, even liberals now not campaigning on that. That's a good sign. It means, because they're good at polling, and they know, politicians only based on polling. Based on what people say, and you can see what is polling in which direction. So it's all based. There is no truth in politics. It's all polling and propaganda. I hate to say, it's unfortunate, but let's look at results and who governs better, and who brings prosperity, who brings safety, who protects our country, who gives good economy, job, and opportunities to people, good education. We have to start people paying attention. Talk is cheap, action matter, and talk to people that just say, think about it. What is better for you, your family, and your children? And think about it. Who is going to deliver that? Or do you want to go on radical agenda? And I don't think most Americans want to be puppets to radical agenda.
And once again, that was Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. It was an absolute honor to speak with her today. I hope you guys enjoy this content. We got a lot more coming. These connections that we've been building through your support are everything for our freedom, and it couldn't be done without you. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart that we're able to get this message out, and much, much more to come. Thank you again to the Congresswoman, and thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next one.